Welcome to episode 3 of Gigabits and Gigahertz, a vlog about telecom, the WISP industry, and a whole bunch of stuff. And I'm pretty happy to have here today as my guest, Claude Aiken. How you doing, Claude? Good
I'm
afternoon.
doing well, doing well. Good to see you, Gino.
Good to see you too, and thank you for accepting our invitation and being part of this experiment. This is our third episode, and we're very happy to bring news and commentary about industry trends and what's going on within the telecom and WISP space. So, Claude, for the people that do not know you, can you give us a little intro of who you are, what you're doing right now, where you came from?
Sure. So thanks again for having me, Gino. This is it's a great conversation. It's good to see you doing this, and really excited to be part of the conversation as well. So I am currently the president and CEO of WISPA, which is the organization that represents WISPs. We have, I think I checked this morning, we have about 940 members.
Nice.
Who are all across the country. Small businesses providing connectivity to folks who need it the most, entrepreneurs, innovators, and we tried to help advocate for them in DC. We tried to help them learn more about how to better their businesses and really lift the industry as a whole. As for me, my background before this role, I've been in it for about a couple years now. I came from the government regulatory side. I spent about 10 years at the FCC in a variety of different capacities, everywhere from a line attorney to a team manager to working for a couple of the political appointees. So I think that was the background that the WISPA board was trying to fill when they were looking for a leadership candidate, and I'm really happy I'm here.
Thank you. And I read about your background, and you went to law school, right?
Yes, sir, I did.
So what's your plan, like being in the telecom industry as a lawyer?
I've always been interested, not necessarily in telecom, but in the intersection between technology and the law. And I think that kind of started in college when, kind of being a little bit of a poor college student, a little bit of a cheapskate. My computer broke and I had to get a new one. So I figured it would be cheaper to build one from parts than to buy one. And so that kind of grew into... I worked for a law firm, trying to figure out whether this is something that I wanted to get into. He knew that I had some very basic computer skills, and he was like, "Well, what can you build a bunch of desktops for our firm? And oh, by the way, can you, run a VPN between two of our offices?" So I was like, "Oh, I can figure that out." And since the law ends up lagging technology a lot of times, that was one of the things that interested me going into law school. And telecom is just a way that it kind of worked out. It was one of the things that I was considering as I was leaving law school, and I got sucked in and haven't left since.
Wow, nice, interesting, very interesting background. And I can attest of the growth that WISPA has acquired during your tenure. And even before, so I remember when WISPA started, it was like 10 guys.
Yeah.
More than maybe 10 years ago. And it basically has grew into up to almost 1,000 members. Wow, that's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
Pretty exciting. That demonstrates the size of the industry.
It does.
And all those members are all based in the United States, or do you have members outside of the States?
We've got some international members as well, folks far afield as Cyprus, New Zealand, folks who find value in the work that we do. Probably not so much in the advocacy work, but in the education and just kind of keeping tabs. A lot of times the U.S. is seen as a leader in the telecom policy space. So some of the things that we achieve here end up filtering out to other countries as well. So I think we're glad to have them, and it's a lot of fun.
Awesome. So let's get to the hot topics in the in the industry. There are lots of them, but I would like to start with the current situation, COVID, and lockdowns all over the states and other areas of most of the world. How is WISPA coping with this and dealing with this situation? And obviously, you guys had to cancel the WISP America show. I was really looking forward for that one in Dallas.
Yeah.
But it is what it is. It was a bad decision, but a right decision, I will say. How you guys are dealing with this, and how WISPA has modified the way it works, and how it looks forward to maybe WISPALooza, that's the next show in October.
Yeah. So I think WISPA kind of reflects the industry, and I think ever since ever since COVID hit, I think WISPs have been crazy busy. Often they're the folks that people turn to for quick service, because it's a lot faster than trying to build a whole fiber line to the home. Just being able to hang the radio up there and boom, next day you have service. It's a lot faster. So a lot of our members have been crazy busy, and that kind of held the same for us too. It was really unfortunate that we had to cancel the show, but it was the right thing to do. It was the right thing for us to be able to offer refunds to our members, and I think it was also the right thing to make as much content that we were able to put together available for free online to the industry, so that they were able to continue to educate themselves about the latest developments on everything from regulatory to HR to branding. So yeah, we absolutely have taken a financial hit as an organization, but at a time where things have been really crazy. Washington D.C. has been really active as well, and we've been simultaneously making the WISP voice heard in the halls of Congress as they've been considering relief legislation. Trying to educate folks on things like the CARES Act, the Paycheck Protection Program, which I know that some of our harder hit members have taken advantage of. And then just trying to make sense of, this whole pandemic's impact on the industry. So and that's on top of all of the other regular stuff that's going on as well. So, the FCC is continuing their work on spectrum policy and on the RDOF auction. So, I think we had a board meeting this morning, and I was telling everyone, I can't think of a single WISPA staff member that over the past couple months hasn't been working nights, weekends, early mornings to try to best serve our industry, and I think it shows. I think our industry has stepped up. I think our organization has stepped up, and I think we've really made a difference.
Yeah, it makes total sense. And you touch on some interesting topics there. Our company received the PPP loan, but you also talked about some other legislation that being discussed on. Can you expand a bit on that? What's being discussed and what can we expect?
Sure. So, I think it's no secret that that Congress is taking a look at further, recovery and stimulus legislation to deal with the COVID pandemic. The House of Representatives has passed a package. Some of the things in there we like, some of them in there that we're not wild about. So we're trying to help educate all members of Congress who will listen about our industry, how that differs from some of the more established players and the bigger telecoms, and
Right.
The unique needs that smaller innovators and entrepreneurs have. And we've been really appreciative of all of the members who have kind of stepped up and answered our call when we've said, hey, we really need you to kind of weigh in on this. That's being a small, scrappy organization ourselves, that's really how we end up getting things done on Capitol Hill is when members engage with their elected representatives to tell the story, which is a fantastic one.
How successful has you guys, I mean WISPA, has been going to Capitol Hill and discuss all these topics in representation of WISP? Because I remember maybe 5 years ago, it was like we didn't have any sort of voice. What's the situation right now?
I think it's still, if I'm honest, it's still a mixed bag. Sometimes we'll walk into a congressional office and we'll have a little flyer on what a WISP is, and and they'll say, "Oh, I've never heard of a WISP before. What's fixed wireless? What's a WISP?" But I think when we hear when I hear a senator, when they're having an oversight hearing on telecom, and they talk about not only mobile wireless but mobile and fixed wireless, that lets me know that we're being much more successful in telling our story to Capitol Hill, and making sort of the WISP use case for spectrum known, making the WISP business model a lot better known. And I think that's reflected by our some of our successes there. It's not necessarily that we get a lot of what we want. A lot of our successes are defense rather than offense. But we've brought a lot of additional resources to the table in the advocacy realm, and I think that's really shown in some of the results that we've been able to achieve for the industry.
I think so, and obviously lately the FCC has been pretty involved in putting WISP within the whole context of telecom. The commissioner, Ajit Pai, is very knowledgeable about the topic. He's visited a lot of WISP. He visited Puerto Rico during the Hurricane Maria situation. So I am very happy about that we are being seen as one of the options for the American people as a service provider. That's pretty important. Now that we're touching this topic, how will you rate your success with CBRS and what was done there? And we can't touch a lot about that because the clock started, and we can not talk too much about it. But in general context, what do you think about that result, that situation?
I think I came aboard at WISPA in mid 2018, which is kind of was in the heat of the debate about the CBRS policy, and there had already been a lot of great work done by the WISPA advocacy team and prior WISPA leadership on it. I think I would probably rate it at about an 8. Kind of talking in line of sometimes what we don't see is a good thing. Some WISPA staff have been really engaged on the standards process for CBRS, and a lot of times the WISP use case was not necessarily taken into account for the standards, even apart from the policy making that's been gone on at the FCC. So that's something that is very much behind the scenes for the average WISP, that they may not even realize that that's something that we as an organization are engaging in on a daily and weekly basis. I think the thing that tends to get the most press and why we I think some WISPs are a little bit less than happy about the overall result is the licensing structure for the priority access licenses, which ended up as a county instead of a census tract as a result of the way the FCC refreshed the policy. But what I try to tell folks is, the mobile industry wanted these licenses at a level that would have spanned several states. So being able to keep the licenses to an area that was probably a little bit larger than what WISP would have wanted, and as a result, and what I've told the FCC is, will probably mean fewer WISPs will participate in the auction. We still were able to come up with a framework that involved, small business bidding credits, rural business bidding credits, some things that sometimes the FCC is a little bit doesn't really like to do all the time,
right?
As well as keeping a licensing structure that will still preserve opportunity for a lot of WISPs, and WISPs can team up to get licenses as well in areas that are shared. So that's why it's not higher, but it's not lower, because we've really done a lot of work, and I think we've seen a lot of success in CPRS.
I'm pretty happy with the results. It was taking in consideration the push that was made by the mobile operators. We got a very good deal, I will say, on this.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm the good side of this argument.
All right.
And
love to hear it.
Yeah. And before we go to the next question, I will want to tell our viewers that if you have any questions for Claude, you can post it on the comments, and we'll see it and we can discuss it. So going into the next question, and it's a little bit related with CBRS, is the C-band and all the discussions being around the C-band and 3.4, 3.2, 3 gigs. Can you tell us a little bit more about what's going on and update us on us?
Sure. So C-band, it depends on whether you're talking C-band downlink or uplink. So C-band is sometimes used to refer to 3.7 to 4.2,
right?
And then also in the 6 gigahertz band. So,
3 gig.
You see, it's confusing to everybody.
Okay.
But yeah, so for C-bands, the FCC is looking at auctioning off a few hundred megahertz there, and retaining some for continued access by satellite and broadcasters. Those are likely going to be larger area auctions. As a result, that's an area where we were a little bit disappointed in the direction that the FCC took. We thought that we could share pretty robustly with existing satellite uses.
Okay.
But we're hopeful about future spectrum bands coming down the pipeline. There are studies going on the 3.1 to 3.5 gigahertz band. Which, because of its adjacency to CBRS, could provide some, and the existence of federal incumbents in the spectrum could provide. We could see a CBRS type framework adopted there as well, which would mean the bang for your buck that you're getting with your SAS could just be extended into even more spectrum. So we'll see what happens there. But we've been engaged in so many different spectrum bands as of late. 3.1 to 3.5, 3.7 to 4.2, 6 gigahertz, 5.9. You name it. That's since the lifeblood of WISP's spectrum. That's where we tend to find ourselves a lot.
Yeah, but that it's pretty important and positive that there's a lot of discussion about this spectrum, because maybe 5 years ago there was none. So it's pretty good for the industry as a whole. And I think the big win came with 6 gig.
Yes.
That we were able to grab up to 850 megahertz for unlicensed use. So that's pretty exciting.
Very exciting.
Can you give us a little bit, info on that, how that went down? And
Sure. Yeah, no, that was, I think that was one where we were very, very engaged. We had developed a pretty broad coalition of other folks who were interested in it for unlicensed use. And we were, I don't want to give away too much of the secret sauce, but I think we were able to prevail at the end of the day with 850 megahertz of unlicensed spectrum, even though it's subject to automated frequency coordination. That's it's a pretty huge win. It'll provide a lot of capacity for future growth for a lot of WISPs. And we did some back of the envelope calculations, and in terms of value of that spectrum to our members, if you are if you had been a WISPA member since the beginning, the value of that spectrum to your company eclipses all member dues that you have paid to WISPA over the entirety of your membership. So that's just kind of an example of, I think, the value that we bring that we sometimes don't do a very good job of communicating to our members. But it's something that we're incredibly excited about.
Yeah, and I agree. And also the big value of this spectrum is that it's going to be shared with Wi-Fi, so you have volume of manufacturing.
Yes,
And the chipsets. So that translates into manufacturers like Cambium and Ubiquity being able to produce equipment at a very low rate of cost. So that translates for more business to us for the WISP. So thank you very much for that. That was a great ad and a great win for the WISPA and the whole industry. We got a question here. I will let you answer that one.
2.5 gigahertz. That is one that we also have been pushing. I think that one is probably, given the focus on 6 gigahertz on a 5.9 and on bringing C-band home is likely to slip to next year. We're still continuing to advocate and telling the WISP story there. But I wouldn't anticipate that one coming to a head this year.
So what's the plan there? What WISPA is working with that band?
So the FCC has adopted another countywide licensing scheme for the EBS white spaces at WISPA's urging. The FCC had initially had proposed, no small business bidding credits, and had proposed a 100 megahertz wide band plan, which would have probably it doesn't really meet what the WISP use case or cost structure for acquiring that spectrum would likely be. So we were able to convince the FCC to split up the band into much more manageable chunks for WISP acquisition, as well as adopt bidding credits for any future auction there. And I think one of my favorite lines from FCC Chairman Pai came out of a result of that FCC meeting when they adopted the EBS order, where he thanked us for our support of what they did and called WISPs the foot soldiers of the digital revolution. So,
wow.
Which is a great quote that I love to repeat.
We have to use it more often then.
Absolutely.
So, and I think that is great news for the industry. And this week there's some rumblings about the RDOF auction system and the possibility of WISP finally getting to bid on the 1 gig tier. I know it's not finalized. There's some preliminary discussions about that. Do you think that will pass and be a win for us?
We're hopeful. The FCC goes through this multi-stage process where they finalize the policy and then they start looking at the auction procedures for auctions of this sort. So the initial proposal on the auction procedures basically said, we don't really see WISPs doing gigabit speeds.
Right.
So any sort of fixed wireless application will be prohibited from bidding in the gigabit tier. And then, we pointed at examples like your company and like the folks who are, manufacturers who are developing, gigabit gear and basically said, well, look, we're talking, there's so much national conversation about 5G and the ability to provide multi-gigabit speed, over mobile wireless, much less fixed. Right. It just doesn't seem to make sense to prohibit, innovative technologies that could potentially drive down the cost to the government in the auction to be prohibited from competing. And I think, I think the FCC heard us. We've still got some work to do to kind of push it over the finish line, but we're very grateful that the FCC, kind of backed off of that and said, okay, well, even if you aren't a current gigabit fixed wireless provider, will allow you to kind of make your case as to how you could be one in terms of participating in the auction. So another one that we're pretty happy about.
Nice. Yeah. And talking about the FCC making some decisions, I read today that they were basically blocking Starlink for participating in the art of using the sub 100 milliseconds tier. You have any thought on that?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of get where the FCC is coming from on that one, because there is really no, unlike gigabit fixed wireless, where we have, instances of that already occurring, even
Right.
if they're not very widespread. We have no idea how these low Earth orbit constellations are actually going to operate. And distance to the Earth is a very important factor in developing latency. And obviously, the closer you are, the less likely there is to be significant latency. But there's also latency involved in the constellation communicating with itself. And in other aspects of network engineering that I'm sure you're much more familiar with than I am. So while I can see why intuitively it said, well, they're low Earth orbit. Why are they prohibited from doing that? One, they're not. There's no instance of that happening today on a mass market basis. And two, there's other network engineering things that go into figuring that out. I can see why the FCC is proposing what it is proposing.
Okay, well, if Elon Musk is watching this and you want to counter, you're invited. You can invite it. Just call me or send me a tweet or something, and we can have you on the podcast, and you can explain all this. So your invitation is open. So cool. So all right, it's been pretty interesting to discuss. Any for closing arguments? Any what's in store for WISP in the future, for WISPA?
You know what? I think it's going to be a really interesting time now for WISPs, for WISPA, and I think just for broadband generally, because this pandemic has really pulled back the curtains on how big a problem the digital divide is in our country, and not just talking about the rural digital divide, which is kind of what we tend to focus on the most, but also folks in urban areas who either can't get good broadband or can't afford broadband. So I think we'll see a lot of policy focus and probably a lot of government money pushed towards broadband in the near future, and that's something that we as WISPA are going to be keeping tabs on. But I think for the message to WISPs is this is likely coming. There's going to be a lot of focus on providing really good, high quality broadband. So one, we need to be providing good customer service. We need to, a happy customer means someone who isn't complaining to their representative in Congress about the kind of service that they're getting. And then just, stay on top of what we're communicating. Be an active WISPA member, because that's, one of the best ways that we can figure out how to help WISPs navigate whatever the future holds as it relates to policy in DC.
Afternoon, and a great time to discuss all these topics. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation, and thank you for all the viewers who have connected and watched this transmission. We will have the recording available here in Facebook and LinkedIn and YouTube too. So if you like what you're seeing here and wish to have more of this being promoted, give us a like, share the content, or if you don't like it, also let us know what you don't like, and we will fix it. So, Claude, thank you very much. Thank you for your work. Thank you for all you're doing with WISPA. I wish WISPA and you all the success in all the endeavors that you have in the future. And to all that are watching this transmission, thank you very much for connecting, and see you next time.
Awesome. Thank you, Gino.
Gigabits and Gigahertz, Claude and Gino live, and see you next time. And keep America connected. Thank you very much.
Thank you.